Hello and welcome to the first shared lesson video of the year. I will be the teacher for this one. My name is Mr. Loudermilk. I'm a teacher at Meade Junior High. You might know me. I coach wrestling and track over at Meade. You might have seen me through that. If not, I'm Mr. Loudermilk. I just wanted to put a name to the voice so it's not just some random dude talking to you. All right. So how these videos are going to work, it's basically going to mirror our shared instruction that will be happening in the classroom. So if you miss the class or if you're learning virtually, you'll have the exact same exposure to the lesson that everyone else does. Most lessons will start with a warm-up, so I'm going to go to that slide. Warm-ups are meant to be done before watching the video. So you're supposed to start, try to work through the math. A lot of times they'll pertain to previous lessons or previous knowledge. Like this one, for instance, today's lessons on order of operations. And so we're going to see, through this warm-up problem, how much you guys already know about order of operations. So if you're watching this video and haven't tried the warm-up, you need to pause it, do the warm-up problems. It'll be up to your teacher how you want to do that. You can do it on a separate sheet of paper. You can do it within ClassKick. Depends on what format they're using, but the problems will be consistent. So here we go. First problem. It says 4 squared plus the quantity of 3 plus 2 squared minus the quantity of 10 divided by 2. There's a lot of stuff going on there. I know that I have to try to follow the order of operations, which is, and we'll find out on the next slide, which you might have learned it as, and I'm going to write it the old school way, as Gemdas. Gemdas. You'll see that we'll be replacing that P with a new letter on the next slide, but basically this is parentheses, then exponents, then multiplication and division, then addition and subtraction. So following along that line, I need to start on this problem with what's inside the parentheses. So I'll highlight the parentheses. So those are the first two steps I'm going to do. I'm going to rewrite 4 squared plus 3 plus 2 is 5 squared minus 10 divided by 2, which is also 5. So first step complete. And I write it right underneath. That's how I organize it. Hopefully you guys are doing something similar. I have seen students try to write little things above. If that works for you, I guess, but it's really nice to stay organized, especially as the steps increase throughout these problems. Now, I look up here. My next letter is E, so I have to do anything with an exponent. So 4 squared, I'm going to do that. That is 16. A lot of people want to say 4 squared is 8. Well, that's if you were doing 4 times 2, but 4 squared is actually 4 times 4. Plus 5 squared, which is 25, minus 5. All right, second step complete. So now I'm on M and D. There are no multiplication or division operations within this problem, so I'm going to move on to A and S. I have to add and subtract whatever comes first, left to right. So I'm going to do 16 plus 25, which is 41, minus 5, and then I'll subtract and get my final answer of 36. Hopefully you're watching this video and just confirming what you got. If not, you can go back and correct it. Again, this is just a warm-up. Just hoping to get you guys back on the train of thought that we need to be on. This is day 1 of the 2020-2021 school year. All right, moving on to question number 2. Now I have brackets and parentheses. So the P sort of becomes obsolete. That's where you're going to see a new letter take place, which stands for grouping symbols. So we're going to look in here. We're going to go inside our grouping symbol and go into the innermost grouping symbol, which is 6 plus 2, and rewrite it as 8. So that was my first step. My brackets stay there. My parentheses are now gone because that's the only part that I redid. Now, instead of rewriting everything in this line, I'm gonna go down one more. 8 minus 3 is still inside a grouping symbol, so I'm going to do that and get 5. And then I'm going to rewrite everything. So I have the squared still. I have this times 3. I have this negative 8 divided by 4 plus 12 plus this. All right, so I rewrote everything. I've taken care of the brackets and the parentheses. Going back up here, now anything with an exponent has to be done next. So that is this, 5 squared gets done next, which is 25. We had that on the previous problem. 25 times 3, write everything else back in, -8 divided by 4 plus 12 plus this. Okay. Now, P and E are done. M and D. Now, the main issue I see with M and D is that students think that because M is first, it has to be done first. That is not that's not the case. Multiplication or division, whatever comes first from left to right. So I actually have to divide here first. It doesn't actually matter in this problem, but I'm going to divide first. -8 divided by 4 becomes -2. Remember to keep that negative. So -2 plus 12 plus 25 times 3. All right, we'll move up the screen. Now I have -2 plus 12 plus 25 times 3. I'm going to rewrite the -2. Oh, hold on. Let me add a little, send the page down. -2 plus 12. Now the 25 times 3 becomes 75. Sorry that the blue line's going through it, but you guys can see what I'm doing. Because I have to do the multiplication step, now I can add and subtract from left to right. -2 plus 12, that's an integer operation. Different signs, so I'm going to subtract them. -2 plus 12 actually is 10. It's like doing 10 minus 2, or I'm sorry, 12 minus 2. And then plus 75 gives me a final answer of 85 on that problem. Okay? Now we're going to move into the next problem. We just finished the warm-up. And now for these next slides, the idea is that you fill them in as you're listening to me, just like you would in a normal shared lesson if you were in the classroom. So Gemdas, this is the new improved version of PEMDAS. This is our order of operations. Everything stands for everything stands for something. So Gemdas, the first one, G, this now stands for grouping symbols. Okay, I'm going to type that in just to try to make it look nice. So this G stands for grouping. And those can include parentheses, they can include brackets, it can include absolute value bars. There's a lot of different grouping symbols that come into play in accelerated algebra. That's the main reason why we have to change from parentheses to grouping. In the second box is exponents, which we talked about in the previous slide. Then we have multiplication. Then we have division. Then we have addition. And then finally, subtraction. Now, off to the side, I'm going to draw in a little something just to remind me that with multiplication and division, I put these little arrows in. It's whatever comes first from left to right. So if division was before it, I can do division first. Same thing with addition and subtraction. You know how I teach my students a lot of times is addition is not more important than subtraction. They're both the same level of importance. So you must do them in the order that they're given to you. Okay, so that's the first slide. We're going to move on to the next slide. Now here's our first example. A lot of order of operations going on here. We have a 2 outside of brackets, then we have brackets within our numerator, we have parentheses in our numerator, we have a parenthesis on our denominator, then we have a -8 all at the end. So sometimes I'd like to I create this checklist off to the side. The problem with the checklist is sometimes you have to go back and restart. Like you'll do a grouping symbol, but then there'll be another grouping symbol, so you can't cross it off. So I'm writing Gemdas, that's a D. Okay. So I look at this and I got to develop a plan. You got to look at the whole problem before you start. Because if you try to multiply that 2 that's on the front, you're going to get it wrong. So you got to say, all right, where is the most grouping symbols I see? And if I look at the numerator of what's inside the brackets, and I see grouping symbols there. So that's what I'm going to do first. I'm going to deal with the numerator. So I now have, on the numerator, I have 2 times, instead of 16 minus 2 times 4, I'm actually going to do the 2 times 4 because I'm going to do the order of operations within. I'm going to do 16 minus 8. That's what 2 times 4 is. Still keep the brackets there. And then on the bottom, I'm also going to do something. I'm going to do the 2 plus the 6. I can do that step right now because the denominator is almost like a different order of operations problem in itself. I'm going to put the 2 out front, put the minus 8 in the back. All right, now I work on step 2. I have still brackets in my numerator, so I'm going to do what's inside the brackets. So I still have 2 times 8 all over. I can now treat the denominator separately, so I'm going to do what's on the denominator. 2 plus 6, which is 8. I have this 2 out front, and I have this minus 8 here. Okay. Again, I still have those brackets, so I'm going to deal with that. I'm going to multiply the 2 times the 8 on the top, so I get 16 divided by 8. Okay. The 2 on the front minus 8. So here now I have multiplication, because I have to multiply the 2 times this fraction, and division. So you can do it 2 different ways. You could do the 2 times the 16 and then divide by 8, or you could do the 16 divided by 8 and then multiply by the 2. That's called simplifying before we multiply. I'm just going to follow the order of operations as they're stated. So I'm going to do the 2 times the 16, because I'm going to think of this as 2 over 1. And I'm going to get 32 over 8 minus 8. Okay, 32 divided by 8 is 4. Sorry, I'm going off to the side, but I ran out of room. 4 minus 8 gives me a grand total of negative 4. Some ask, is it important that you leave the negative? Absolutely. Negatives are incredibly important. If I didn't put the negative in there, I'd be way off. Okay, negative 4 is a far different situation than positive 4. And that's my final answer for number 1. Now we're going to move on to number 2. Number 2, again, multiple steps here, order of operations. You could rewrite the Gemdas on the side. You notice that I didn't really use it as a checklist just because I had to restart so many times. It could get confusing, but always keep in mind, grouping symbols first, then exponents, then multiplication or division, then addition or subtraction, left to right. All right, I have some different types of grouping symbols here. I have these parentheses, but those parentheses really aren't a grouping symbol. They're just showing me that I have to cube all of negative 2, which is important, but not as important as these grouping symbols. These grouping symbols here are what we call absolute value bars. Absolute value bars are something that basically is asking you, what is the distance that this number inside of here is from 0? It'll always be positive because we're talking about distance. So if I look, I have the opposite of the absolute value of negative 5 minus 12. So I'm going to do what that is. Negative 5 minus 12 is negative 17 minus 5 times negative 2 to the third power. All right, still not done with that grouping symbol there. The absolute value of negative 17 becomes 17. So when I take it out, it looks like this. Why is it still negative? Well, the problem is that we're taking the opposite of the absolute value. So that negative symbol stays in front, so we get the opposite of positive 17, which is still negative 17. All right, I'm going to rewrite the rest. Minus 5 times negative 2 to the third power. All right, if I look back at my checklist, I got grouping symbols taken care of. Now I got to do exponents. I have to take -2 to the third power. So that's -2 times -2 times -2, which is actually -8. So I have -17 times -5 times, or -5 times -8. All right. Now what's my next step? I have -17 minus 5 times -8. Multiplication comes before subtraction, so I have to do 5 times -8, which becomes, or you can think of it as -5 times -8. Either way, it's going to become positive 40. Okay. If you did 5 times -8, then you would have been subtracting -40, which is the same thing as adding 40. And, oh, can't move up. So now I have -17 plus 40. If you do that, different signs. I have a little song for this. Same sign, keep and add, different sign, subtract. These two numbers have different signs, so I'm going to do 40 minus 17 and get a final answer of positive 23. Keep the sign of the bigger number, then you'll be exact. So I kept the positive because the bigger number here was 40, and that was positive. Final answer 23, which just so happens to be the number of the greatest basketball player to ever live. If you're thinking somebody that plays in Los Angeles, you're wrong. It's Michael Jordan. All right, moving on to question number 3. Wow. So much stuff going on here. We got brackets, we got parentheses, we got addition signs, we got division signs, we got multiplication, we got everything. We got fractions. Okay, where the heck do I start? On this one, you actually have some options. You can do the fraction on the right because you can simplify that all together, because a fraction bar does sort of count as a grouping symbol. Or you can do the brackets on the left. I'm going to do the bracket on the left. So within the bracket on the left, I have 6 minus 3 inside parentheses. So I'm going to do that first. I get 3. I have 3 squared. I have 6 squared. And then I have this division sign. It's all inside the brackets. That's all I'm rewriting so far because I don't want to rewrite everything. 6 squared is 36. Divided by 3 squared, which is 9. So now I have that inside of brackets. 36 divided by 9 becomes 4. So now I took all of that and rewrote it as 4. Now I'm going to rewrite everything else on the left. Okay, so I got now 3 times 4 over there. Now I'm sort of going to split this off. I'm going to treat this fraction as its own self. And I'm going to remember that I'm adding it. So whatever I get over here, I'm going to add it. 14 times 2 divided by 4. So 14 times 2 is 28. Divided by 4, that's the top. The bottom, again, can be treated separately. 5 squared minus 18. So 5 squared is 25 minus 18. Okay, again, let's work on simplifying the top more. 28 divided by 4. 28 divided by 4 is 7. The top becomes 7. The bottom is 25 minus 18, which is also 7. So after I do all of that, I get 7 on the top, 7 on the bottom, which reduces down to 1. Okay? So I get 3 times 4 plus 1. I'm going to erase this line that I drew because it's sort of distracting right now. So I have 3 times 4. Everything on the right became 1. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 plus 1 is 13. Those are the problems for today. The nice thing about the video, if you ever need to pause it or replay sections, you can do that. Make sure, I know it sometimes I talk a little fast. Take your time with it, okay? This is another resource for you to make sure that you're understanding this information. Good luck, and we'll see you again tomorrow.